take mine off.
Good morning, everyone. The chair will call the business and industry hearing to order. And if the clerk is ready, she can please call the roll.
Chairman Oliveira,
Here.
Chairman Simmons,
Here.
Representative Fletcher,
Here.
Representative Collier, Representative Villalba,
Here.
Representative Romero,
Here.
Representative Rinaldi. We have a quorum.
Members, we have a quorum. I have some opening remarks, but the first thing I want to do, if you will indulge me and join me in rules do not know we have a member of this committee. Awesome baby could not be there because he was us because he's taking care of life and family right now. And I'd like to just have a moment of silence. Well, thank you all for coming down to South Padre Island. It's a little bit of a deviation from the meeting at the Capitol. I think you all agree. It's an important part of our legislative district. Most of my 32 years in the House, I've represented it. It's been a great honor to represent the side and to see it grow. A couple of housekeeping thing members, or rather witnesses, make sure you filled out the witness affirmation form. Larry, you can need to, but other folks who are testifying must fill one out. And also, please, I'll start with myself. Oh, thank you. Members, you have to hit the base of the microphone to turn on your microphone so this can be properly recorded. But if you'll join me in turning off your cell phones, I would appreciate it. Having taken care of all this, it's my privilege to recognize not only one of the best mayors South Padre Island has ever had, but also a dear friend. The Honorable Barry Patel is a businessman, has a beautiful hotel that we are enjoying, and we even got state rates out of him. Thank you. Unfortunately, the state's cheap, so we have to get those state rates, and we appreciate your helping us with that. I want to thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for all the hospitality, your staff, and always, well, what you do with us on the state level. Members, he is a leader now up and down the coastal communities and elsewhere and talking about different things we need to do, and he's an unstoppable force in being committed to what he does. So again, thank you, Mayor, and with that, let me again thank you all for coming down here today, and let me introduce to you Mayor Barry Patel. Mayor, if you'd address us.
Chairman, thank you very much for those kind words. And I'd like to extend a warm welcome to South Padre Island, to all the committee members, Committee Member Fletcher, Simmons, Villalba, and Ramos. I'm sorry, Romero. And I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to South Padre Island. Thank you for being here today. I would like to also take this opportunity to say a few words about South Padre Island. First of all, it's wonderful to see our leaders come down to our communities and conduct the people's business. And I encourage you to do this more often, and then on South Padre Island. SPI, or South Padre Island, offers great natural beauty, as you can see. And within it, we also share a dynamic business community. The hospitality industry takes in approximately $100 million a year in revenues on South Padre Island. And that's the hotels, the condos, and the rental, and also about a similar amount in sales tax generating revenue, such as our restaurants, our shops, and our entertainment. South Padre Island is also unique in that we offer not only opportunities to large hotel operators, but also the small investor looking for a second home as not only a place to vacation, but also to be able to rent the rest of the year and thereby generate some income. In fact, 1/3 our hotel occupancy tax revenue comes from just such investments, as the condo rentals and so forth. The hospitality industry segmentation is complete here, and the mid-range hotels and the full-service hotels and the condo market provides a unique hospitality industry on South Padre Island. I've done business in many communities, but this is really unique. Having said all that, I feel that we have only scratched the surface as regards to tourism to our great state. And with some added support from our legislatures up in Austin for our industry, I think we can bring in more visitors from within and from out of state and help with filling in some of the gaps that are surely upon us from the dropping energy-related revenue to the state. So as you do the people's business today, I hope that you keep that in mind, that there is a great opportunity that lies in the tourism industry, not only on South Padre Island, but statewide. So with that, I'd like to welcome each and every one of you. Thank you for being here on South Padre Island, and I hope this is the first of many more visits. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it again. Your hospitality and everyone on the island has been wonderful. I want to just now go into some more housekeeping about scheduling for today and for tomorrow. And if you have questions, we can talk about it later. But very briefly, when I planned having a hearing down here, we had an additional topic, but we took it off at the request of the author. So we're going to focus on one very, very major piece of legislation today. We will probably break for lunch, and I don't think we'll need to return. We will we'll have rides over to where we're having lunch, and then in the afternoon we were going to, then we'll go back to the hotel. At 3 o'clock, we're going to meet up with the members of the International Trade and Intergovernmental Affairs Committee at the Port of Brownsville. Oh, thank you. So at 2 o'clock, we'll board our vans and cars and go back to the hotel, and then we'll be leaving then for the port. So it's going to be a very busy day. When Chairman Anchia we're required as a result of Speaker to have a joint meeting on our charge with them. He figured out that it was a good idea to have the hearing here after I chatted with him a little bit. So we're going to enjoy that meeting with them tomorrow morning in Brownsville. We'll be touring the port facilities, and Chairman Fletcher, you'll be able to ask any questions you want about port security. There will be law enforcement personnel as well, and I guess we're glad to see we had the police chief here earlier. At the end of that tour, we'll come back, have a little time to rest, and then we'll meet at the hotel lobby at 7. Tomorrow we leave very early. We're going to have to board a bus at 8. I know that's not very early for you all, but it is very early for me, to head to the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, and that way we can get you all to your flights on time in the afternoon, those of you who need to return. If you have cars, let's get together with staff and JJ and Tony so we make sure everybody's got a ride. Any questions, members? Any comments? Okay, then we'll get started. Let me do a little bit of discussion about this bill and why I think it's extremely important to Texas. We were charged with doing an interim study on moving people from welfare to work. This is something that Texas did back in 1993. We created a tax refund at that time for businesses that hired welfare recipients. The idea was that the cost of the tax refund would be considerably less than the cost of welfare benefits, and I think that's been proven very true by a significant amount of money. Obviously, giving somebody a job and all the benefits from that is something we all believe in. When we created the tax refund, therefore, it was a win-win for Texas. 3 years after we did it, the federal government created their own work opportunity tax credit on federal income taxes. So our tax refund would be on your state taxes, franchise tax, sales tax, or whatever state taxes you're paying. And we tried to align it, but we changed our tax code and the concept of the refund just fell away and became less attractive. Additionally, the Affordable Care Act changed health insurance requirements, so that made it so that the standard set for the Texas tax refund became quite outdated, and employers just could not reconcile that with the requirements of the Affordable Care Act and the federal refund. The federal government also expanded its tax credit that was designed to benefit, but the Texas statutes did not change. So it was brought to my attention late in the session, and I filed a bill just before the deadline, and unfortunately we were not able to deal with the fiscal note, which I think at that time came out to be $90 million. LBB has a policy where they look at the immediate impact of a bill and not always the whole term or yes, the long term or the whole story. In our substitute that we laid out, we made the refund, we changed it into a tax credit because that's easier, and most employers want a tax credit. They feel it first rather than a refund that comes later. Also, we tried to align it with the federal tax credit so that TWC would just certify one employee one time and not have to go through two different administrative processes, one federal, one state. We were one of the first to create these back in '93, and other states have done so since, and now other states are adopting state tax credits similar to what House Bill 3305 proposed. The $90 million fiscal note was why we didn't move forward. LBB, we're going to try to work with them to show them the savings, so that can be part of the analysis this time. And assuming the bill is filed, which I intend to do, hopefully with your all's support, we will see that the moving people off of public assistance and into a job, we'll see those benefits.
Mr. Chairman, the fiscal note was really, though, it wasn't a cost to the state, it was a reduction in revenue to the
Yes,
state. Is that
yes,
correct? Okay.
yes. And that is also big. I appreciate you bringing that up. So this is a rough summary of where we were. Everybody I've spoken to believes the savings would be phenomenal, getting people off of public assistance. But figuring out that savings is one of the things we're charged with doing, and trying to come up with a good rationale for this legislation. I think it will enjoy broad support and bipartisan support. So with that, if there are no questions, I would call first Larry Temple of the Texas Workforce Commission to talk about the current situation for the two incentives.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members. Thank you for inviting me to share with you what we're doing at the Workforce Commission as it relates to the tax credits.
If you could, Larry, maybe, I don't want to change your comments completely, but if you could talk about the difference between the Chapter 301 tax refund and the federal work opportunity tax credit, and the differences and the problems you all were having too on certifications.
Absolutely. For the record, Larry Temple, Executive Director of the Texas Workforce Commission. As the chairman referenced, there are two tax credits that we administer. One is the federal work opportunity tax credit, which has many categories in addition to just ex-TANF and Medicaid recipients. And I'll go over those first. They have a target group, different target groups. They have disabled veterans. They have several veteran target groups. They have disabled veterans with service-connected disabilities who've been unemployed for 6 months, veterans who just veterans who've been unemployed for 6 months, disabled veterans with service-connected disabilities, veterans receiving SNAP, food stamps, and veterans who've been unemployed for at least 4 weeks. So that goes from up to a $9,600 tax credit, $5,600, $4,800, $2,400, $2,400, depending on the category, and of course the amount of the wages. Non-veteran target groups would be long-term family assistance recipients who are members of a family that received TANF for at least 18 consecutive months. And this doesn't necessarily have to be the head of the family. It could be a child in the family as well. That's up to a $9,000 federal tax credit. And then you have TANF recipients, ex-offenders, vocational rehab referrals, SNAP, Supplemental Security Income recipients, SSI, have just passed a new long-term unemployed. The rules aren't final yet, but the Department of Labor and the IRS are working on this, and it appears that it will be anyone unemployed 27 weeks or more. We have a lot of those that we're holding, waiting on the final word to be able to process to get back to the employers who have filed for those. And then there's
Larry,
a credit.
Let me interrupt you.
Yes, sir.
You say it goes up to. Do you get a certain amount if you're in each category? Because obviously you could have a disabled veteran who is on SNAP as well, how does it go up to?
You know, that's a good question. If you can stack those, and you've got some people here that make a living, I don't know if you can stack those. I don't believe you can. You can take the higher of the ones. But so if you've got a disabled veteran with a service-connected disability, it's up to $9,600. But if he's also on food stamps, you can't add that to it. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. And then there's also a credit for summer kids in summer youth programs who are 16 and 17 years old. So those are the bulk of the credits. We get quite a volume there.
Hey, Larry, those are all federal tax credits.
Those are all federal tax credits that you're able to take back 2 years and bring forward, and it actually, if you sell your business, can follow the business if you've accrued those unused. We receive quite a few of those, the majority of which we receive by electronically because of the volume, particularly big retail service companies. We receive, I'll just give you an idea of the volume the last 3 years. And the forms that are signed at the time of employment by the employee, and then the employer forwards those to us, that all of those forms are forwarded. Sometimes they're able to determine with some degree of certainty that they're probably going to be eligible, but it's not always sure. So they send in a lot more than get certified. So in 2014, TWC received over 369,000 applications. We processed 366,000 of those, and we certified 133,000 of those as being eligible for tax credits, assuming that the individuals work the number of hours, the maximum number of hours, the minimum number of hours, and the range up to the maximum. That was a possible $321,385,800 in federal tax credits available to employers.
How much was that again? 320?
In 15, we processed we received 430,800 as opposed to 369 the year before. We processed 430,000 thousand, and we certified 146,000, so about 13,000 more than the year before, and it 353,600,000 in possible credits. This year, to date, through March, we've received 238,800. We've processed 235,090, and we've already issued 75,900.
What's the reason for the increase? I mean, obviously, if on this pace you're going to be at six or 700,000. I mean, that's 238 for 3 months.
Yeah, we're at 183 million.
Any idea
right
why
now.
is this an economy-based type?
Hiring, we have 13 million people in the workforce now for the last 2 years. First time we've had. The service industry is a growth industry, one that's hiring more than a lot of others. So, just personally, I see a hiring sign in every coffee shop, every restaurant, every hotel that I go to. So there's a lot of hiring going on. So I think that's it. And you have some new categories. You've added some long-term as well as you've added some veterans that weren't there before.
Have we seen any folks from the oil and gas industry that have been laid off or whatever? Are they starting to fit into a category?
Some of them could fit in as veterans. Some of them also could fit into the food stamps, I would say. I mean, there's some categories, that various categories that they could fit in. Just for the record, since November before last, we've been tracking this, and we've processed about 160,000 oil and gas related unemployment insurance claims, and those are maximum benefits, so they're the maximum benefits. That's quite a hit to the trust fund on that.
So was that just 2015?
From November of 14 is when we started tracking it. So since November of 14.
And that's strictly related to the oil and gas industry?
Strictly, yeah, to the price.
Mr. Chairman,
Now,
may I ask
any question?
one quick question? I'd like to know, on a pure dollars basis, what the allocation would be between the veteran allocation amounts and then non-veteran. So,
I can get that for you and pull that by category. I don't have that with me, but
can you give me a rough 30,000 foot?
I honestly don't know, but I can. And it's going to change when we look at this long-term unemployed as well, too.
Mr. Chairman, as I recall during the discussion for the legislation that you were proposing, that was one of the questions that consistently came up. What if we stripped it down to just veterans, that's to start, and then added the other categories? And that might make it more palatable and change the fiscal note. That's why I'm asking the question.
It's a good question, and again, we hope to hear from some of the experts today about the savings and how we can calculate that and take advantage of that.
And I can get those breakdowns for you.
And Larry, I'm not going to ask you to do this today, and maybe some of the other witnesses can, but any objective critique of the federal system that you can give us later where you might say, well, maybe we should try this option and they're doing this, but this fits Texas better, suits Texas better, want to make it as strong a bill as we can and make it Texas friendly.
Well, and I can give you those breakdowns by categories, and you can see where they're falling. That would help
get
there.
Those categories.
And then you could adjust the rates, those, and I'll give you copies of those, what those various credits are. Well, those numbers are big. The other program, the state program, aren't nearly as big. We've, for the same time period, actually going back to 2012, 2012, we received 1,849 applications. We sent 132 to the comptroller. 2013, 1,380. We sent 92 that were certified to the comptroller. 14, 2,208 received. We sent 304. And to date, we've received 1,413, which goes to that number, increased number. And of course, we haven't sent any of those over to the comptroller. But it's a much narrower population. It's much more targeted, obviously. And when you look at the economy and our really strong workforce program, the average person that comes in on TANF leaves the program with a job in 42 days. And over half of our caseload have at least a 6-month previous attachment to the workplace. So the population of those who haven't worked in a year is fairly small in our TANF population. We do have some that come back in. The recidivism rate's about 15%. But if an individual, probably when this was put in, we did not have nearly as strong a work program emphasizing the responsibility that we do now. In 2003, House Bill 2292 put in stronger sanctions for the individuals that don't comply with the work requirements. And if they don't, they lose all of the TANF grant and the mom's Medicaid. And we were sanctioning 30,000 people a month, about 35% of the mandatory caseload. Within about 2 months of putting those sanctions in, it went down to about 3% sanction, but about double the rate of people complying with their work requirements. And if you're complying with the work requirements, you're going to get a job. So
And the original work requirements, and it's long ago, far away. You had to apply for so many jobs, and you had to give proof to the agency, and then there were additional requirements?
Well, there were a number of hours that one had to participate in. Different things counted, 30 hours basically a week. In Texas, our waiver that and that was prior to the federal welfare reform, our waiver, emphasized work and put the emphasis on a quick attachment to the workplace. And so we've had, when we started there, we probably had about 100,000 adults who were subject to the work requirement. We have less than 8,000 adults statewide now that are subject to the work requirement. So it's that economy coupled with strong accountability and responsibility in the program. But if one comes in the program and gets a job, they're guaranteed child care. They're going to receive 100% of their TANF grant for the first 4 months, kind of a grub stake, if you will. They're still going to be getting food stamps. They'll be diminished somewhat because it's means tested. Mom's still going to get Medicaid for a year. Kids are still eligible for CHIP. And they get the earned income tax credit. So all of that together, child care and everything, and our average wage right now is about $9.25 an hour for the Choices program. So the first year, that's about about a $44,000 package, much of which is not taxable. The child care is not taxable. The Medicaid is not taxable. Of course, the EITC, that's the earned income tax credit.
Does it go away after a year? Or does it stair step?
It stair steps. Some.
The question is there any incentive on that person to say, okay, well, I'm going to quit this job, start all over again because I'm losing all these other benefits?
That's a good question. The Medicaid seems to be a big driver, but that too is a federal requirement that individuals at the state option can keep the adult on Medicaid for 1 year after they leave for benefits for employment. Food stamps stay in place, but they're adjusted depending on the income. The child care is a guarantee, and that averages about $5,000 a year.
How long is the child?
Until the child is 13.
Oh, okay. So it's not tied to a certain...
Well, they would have to be making close to the $20 an hour range to completely...
To go out.
To go out.
Okay,
So,
I got you. Okay.
but they're a priority population. Our continuity of care, once the individual comes in, they're given child care to look for a job, and if they find a job, they're given child care. After a year, then they start having to pay a copay. They pay up to 25% of their, it's determined at the local area. The local workforce boards determine those
How long
copays.
do they have, is there any problem with people that just say they're continuing to look for a job, and so they're getting child care and all these other things, but don't really find a job? Or if y'all find them a job, they're required to take, I mean, tell me how that works?
Well, there is a requirement to participate and look for a job. You have to take a referral. If you turn down a job, then you can lose your benefits. Our employment rate for the TANF population is around 74% on any given month. And our retention rate, and that's still working in the second quarter after the quarter that they exited, so that's at least 6 months out and sometimes more, is almost 80%. So we've got a pretty doggone good retention rate. There's some job skipping back and forth, but I think the days of coming into a welfare program in this state just to get a check and not do anything been over for a while.
Now,
People understand they have to get a job.
OIG come in and look at y'all's work, to the Inspector General, to make sure there's not any fraud, or, I mean, not by your point, you see what I'm saying, by misuse of the system or anything like that? Because we're always concerned about Medicaid fraud, but
Sure.
I mean, this is another state
Sure.
benefit that we want to make
Well,
sure.
we have our own monitoring, and we have our own internal auditor. We're not subject to the HHSC's Office of Inspector General. However, we do share data with the Inspector General. All of our UI data they use for wage verification for eligibility, particularly for Medicaid. So we do provide them, that office, with all of our wage data, which is a big resource for them in making sure people are making the amount of money they say they're making when they do eligibility. As well as we do with child support. We furnish that with the child support division when they're looking at determining child support amounts. So.
If we were to pass our own version of the federal credit, the feds and you all would be independently reviewing this population to make sure they're in compliance. So we'd be minimizing any potential welfare fraud or deceit in the program.
We would certainly, for those TANF clients that are referred to us, we certainly would be making sure that they're compliant with their program. And if there are any Medicaid recipients that are, most all the TANF clients are going to be Medicaid recipients, but there could be some unemployment insurance claimants that have found themselves on Medicaid or CHIP or whatnot. And we do have work requirements for those individuals. And that's the data that we swap back and forth with the OIG at HHSC and with HHSC as well. We have for years swapped that data nightly, actually.
I know that in our area, maybe in some of the members' areas, that HHSC and others are being much more aggressive about investigating fraud. They're not only going after the individual and taking away their benefits, they're shutting down stores and others that, grocery stores and others that attempt to buy food stamps, or make a profit on that. We've had many prosecutions, I know, in South Texas. Would there be the ability to prosecute here if people were committing fraud under either the federal or state refund? Credit?
Well, if the individuals we're going to have the data. The qualification for them is if they weren't working, and the employers are hiring them and sending to us that they're hiring. So, the fact that we've got that data, and of course we share that data back with HHSC. As they do their recertification for all their benefits. So if an individual he or she did not report their income, then we already report regularly to HHSC.
So everybody, I guess
wage
one of
data.
the things that always frustrates me after this long, and probably my colleagues, our computers are going to be talking to everybody, to the prosecutorial parts of the workforce, HHSC, along with the feds, to, again, minimize or eliminate the kinds of problems that are always
Absolutely.
historically anecdotal in this, of the
We
woman in the Escalade driving up with her Gucci purse, and I still want a picture of that. I've been hearing about that for decades, but I haven't found one yet. But
We share data between a lot of agencies, state and federal. We share our wage data with DPS and and just about every local law enforcement. They use our data for finding individuals when they're trying to serve warrants, or if they have someone who has not shown up for court. They can use that data. We provide it to the Attorney General's office for wage data, so they can, one, find people who aren't paying their child support, and secondly, if there are increases in the wages that aren't reported, then they can readjust the child support wages. So we check with vital records at the health department, make sure we're not giving dead people unemployment insurance. So we do a little bit of all of it.
because we have a few dead people still voting for me, I know. Okay, go ahead, Larry.
Well, I think probably that's everything that I thought I needed to cover just from a background. We work with employers. Most of the third-party processes, the Equifax, the ADPs and all, we deal with them electronically, their volume is such. We do work with small employers. Our workforce boards work with small employers on a variety of things, how to post jobs, but also how to, one, look for WOTC eligibles and actually do pre-certifications at the local level so people can use that to help them get a job.
Do you know if any other states or any other areas have looked at, you mentioned disabled veterans, what about disabled, folks with mental disability and others who may still be able to be part of the workforce, but they're always really hard to hire in many instances, and could that be something that could be part of this? Would it help get some of those?
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of those individuals are going to be covered, the ones you're talking about in that category, under the SSI category that the feds have now. So if an individual is receiving SSI, and the Ticket to Work, which is a program that the feds have that allows an individual on SSI to go to work to some degree and not lose their Medicare. So those are some programs that are already in place that our state could possibly look at and verify. And I'll run those numbers by category and let you see what those are.
And that's the last thing is we got to get the mystery out of the savings here. There's several silos of money that are going to these different individuals, and if we can get them employed, we should be keeping some of that money in the silos and not having to spend, public assistance or even our own Medicaid budget, which is just growing and growing, and every session we have a supplemental Medicaid bill because, we didn't have enough money put in it. It's almost like we plan it that way. But we need to do that, and I'm going to implore you and HHSC to see if we can get that data. I know that could be cumbersome, but if we need to make it a formal request, I'd like to see, I have to believe the savings is there. It's just not just because of this bill, but the whole concept. Good employers will help these folks. They'll help veterans and even disabled veterans and others, but any incentive we can give an employer that will lead to the hiring of someone in all these categories, frankly, I wouldn't mind if the numbers doubled.
Right.
They're
Well,
a little lower
for
than
instance,
I thought they'd be.
Through our workforce system, through our one-stops last year, we served approximately 150,000 veterans through the one-stop system. And there are a lot of veterans that are hired that don't go through our system, but just to give an idea of what's come through our system. So
Yeah, the question, I think, Mr. Chairman, would be, what does this grouping of people cost the state today? Okay, let's say that they don't have a job. What's that costing us potentially with CHIP, with Medicaid, with whatever else? And then what would, based on the rules, what would an employer have to pay this person to move them either partially or totally off that? And then how can we tie an incentive to that employer to make sure that it's a net win for the state, and at a minimum, it's a, it doesn't hurt the person, because otherwise they'll stay on it. Sure. And then and it's a win for the employer. I mean, that's where we have to come to in order for it to work properly.
That is the exact crux, and
The first step is knowing what the total, what's the total cost, and then under the federal program, because even though it's a federal program, the state pays part of those costs under Medicaid, right? We understand that's not paid for by the federal government in total. Then what, under federal laws, what would it take for us to be able to move people away from Medicaid? In other words, what type of job would they have to have? And I think that's where we have to try to get that, I think that's where we have to try to get it figured out.
And historically, I've always supported, in terms of tax credits or refunds to create jobs, that it be a job with health insurance wherever possible.
Yeah.
And there may be more jobs out there now available, regardless of how we feel about the Affordable Care Act. We went from 25% of people not on insurance to, I think it's down to 16 or 17.
Well, one thing we know now is that there's some requirement by the employer to either participate or pay a fine either way, or pay a fee either way. So you should have, there probably is a little bit more of that.
Yeah, that would be good to know. Yes, Representative Romero.
You mentioned certification. I guess on the federal level, it's about a third are certified of those applications, and then on a state level, we're somewhere probably less than 10%. It looks like. So what doesn't allow a person to qualify? Why wouldn't you certify them? And just so folks know out there, I mean, are you eligible because you've worked in the past, or are you just eligible because you're unemployed and you've come into your office and seeking employment? And then another question there towards the end you can answer after the first question is, you mentioned that there's help wanted signs everywhere and everybody's looking for employment. Can you speak to how potential wages or what employers are offering, has it gone up? Have you seen that it's gone up? Are the employers willing to pay a little bit more money now, given that the unemployment rate is so low?
on the first, it could very well be that an individual, let's just take one of the categories, that requires someone to be on TANF for at least 18 months, a family member. So there could be a high school student in that family and not really know how long. And generally what happens, employers will have all of their new hires sign these, and then they send them to us and we certify. So in some cases, we do pre-certify some at the one stop to find out, so an individual can come in and say, if you hire me, here's a credit that comes along with hiring me. That's not the bulk of what we receive. The bulk of what we get is when employers pretty much fill these out and then send them to us, and we let them know of those they hired, how many are certified. Now, after we certify them, they have to work a minimum number of hours for that company before the IRS will give them the credit, 120 hours, 240 hours, depending on the, so they have to make that gate. So what we're saying is, assuming these individuals do work the number of hours they have to work, then they're eligible in these different categories. So that's after it leaves us. But the number that I gave in dollar value for the potential would be assuming those individuals did work for the employer that long. But there are the other areas. I was just trying to think of something I could come up with real quick that would not. I think probably one of the biggest ones would be that that maybe they haven't been unemployed as long as they may have thought they were, and we run that against our numbers, or they haven't been on Medicaid or TANF or SNAP as long as they maybe thought they had. They have a rough idea, but generally don't have those certification dates. Would probably be.
Those were very good questions. I want to make sure I understand. Were the numbers you gave us earlier about applications, certifications, and the actual ones granted, were those of the federal?
That was the federal, and the last numbers I gave you were the state ones.
Okay. But the initial numbers of several 100,000, those were just you all certifying to the feds. These people are eligible.
Yes, to the company that these do make the cut, and assuming they work the number of hours that are required, then they can apply for the.
Do you get a sense that the employers out there in Texas know about this, or is it a few sophisticated ones with CPAs? Is this something that I would think they'd know about the federal one, but they may not have any idea that we had a state one before, and now I know it's not workable. And your cost per reviewing each application, if you had to do it twice, would be absurd with different guidelines. But do you think that Texas employers would be taking advantage of this significantly more?
I think in light of the new federal laws on health care, it probably warrants a new campaign out, because there are a lot of employers now that are probably eligible that would not have been earlier. And these guys can probably talk about that better. But I would think, just looking at what the requirements on employers are now, that they would in fact have be providing health care that maybe weren't before. That they're probably hiring people now that would be eligible. No, I don't think it's that widespread. I think it's something that we can help get that word out through our small business conferences that we do with the governor's office in rural areas.
I would think with that and the comptroller's newsletter and other things we could.
Yeah, I think there are ways to get that out.
Okay.
Chairman.
Representative Romero, I'm sorry, did you get all your questions?
Well, I still had one more, but
Go ahead.
the second one, but I want to piggyback on your question there. As far as employers know, you mentioned that you have some that are pre-certified, so that would mean a person goes in and says, I know about this program, I qualify, this is going to help me be more attractive to an employer. Do you track, or could you give us an idea how many people do that? And then, and I would hope that you could do this, track those people and see how long they're unemployed once they've done that. And then even go as far as to determine the amount of wages or the average pay that they get per hour. And to see, does that become attractive? When we talk about promoting to the employer, we should also be promoting to the unemployed person. Hey, this is a really good way for you to cut down the number of time. I think you said 42 days, and then you're employing 76%. Does it go up if a person is pre-certified?
No, I don't know that we do track that, but it would be an interesting thing to look at. Our, like I said, our local boards, and there are other people, there are nonprofits that also work with individuals at the food banks and whatnot that also will help do a pre-certification for individuals. It still has to come through us to be certified, and we would not know when it came in. If it were someone outside, we'd probably know. If we could probably mark it if one of our workforce boards did it and run those, because it's sent in by the employer. It would be coming in by the hiring employer. But we think it's a good thing, all things being equal, that an individual can say, hey, and as a matter of fact, one of the many things that we've got at the Workforce Commissions, we also have EEOC, and using this certification form as a selection tool in hiring is legal. So an individual, an employer can say, hey, I'm going to hire Larry because he gives me a tax credit as opposed to Bill because he doesn't. So I think it is a leg up for an individual.
But you guys don't do anything, if there's a job fair going on, does the Texas Workforce Commission go out and say, hey, let's go out there and let's be present and let's make these folks
we actually
aware?
are there at the job fairs, and particularly when we do the Red, White, and U, the big statewide vet one, and we have a booth there trying to help them pre-certify so they can take that to employers, as well as in all the other job fairs, as well as letting employers know about it. And the EITC is a big thing as well. The EIT, Earned Income Tax Credit, lets an individual basically get everything that was taken out, withholding back, and they can get it at the end of the year. And our average TANF client gets about $2,100 back at the end of the year. They can actually take that quarterly as well. So it helps cash flow in a family if they want to try to get that on a monthly basis. They don't get 100% of it. Still about half of it is held to the end of the year. But that's an extra $2,000 in that household. And we let employers know about that too, because an employer that's helping their individuals get their EITC has a leg up on his or her competition that doesn't know about that, because in some of the service industries, people will walk across the street for 10 cents more an hour. And so if you can maximize that take-home pay for the employees, makes your retention better.
Since you're talking about wages, have you seen wages go up with unemployment being the way it is now? And what are employers willing to offer entry level?
When the price of oil was up, you couldn't hire fast food for under $15 an hour out in West Texas. That's back down to the minimum wage type. I mean, it goes with the market. In Austin and most of the metropolitan areas, it's not uncommon at all, $10 an hour. Rudy's Barbecue is $10 an hour plus education benefits. Bill Miller Barbecue, $10 an hour plus education benefits. So I think retention, turnover is a cost, and employers realize that, and where they can cut that, they do. And then there's some that's still, minimum wage, and that's all it's going to be, and they have a pretty big turnover. But we have seen that go up. Just in our TANF population alone, our average wage is about, I think it's $9.25 an hour.
You beat me to the punch. That's exactly what I was going to ask. I mean, because I think that's important for us as a state to know that those that are taking advantage of this program are being hired at a wage, 30% or 40% higher than minimum wage. I mean, I think that's a tremendous little side note there, and can be used to help propel this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Any other questions, members? Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
The chair calls Evan McDale of DLA Piper. Good morning. I can hear you fine.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Evan McDale. Most of my career, I've represented clients in federal, Senate, state Senates, designed to encourage employers to hire stigmatized individuals who otherwise run the risk of never enjoying steady and stable employment. I commend Representative Oliveira for introducing legislation to fix the Texas Hiring Incentive Program, and I look forward to talking to you about what the numbers we run on the federal level to understand what the program does. Let me say, although I'm not an expert in Texas law, I worked on the federal WOTC since it was enacted in 1996, and can say without question that the pending proposal will reduce state expenditures for public assistance programs in the most cost-effective and compassionate possible manner by opening up job opportunities for individuals who are the most difficult to move out into the workforce. It is excellent public policy. How do I know this is so? Well, several years ago, my tax credit clients commissioned a series of studies by Professor Peter Capelli, a highly respected labor economist at the Wharton School, to determine whether our instinctive understanding of the federal WOTC program was correct. Does WOTC work, and what is its impact on federal and state budgets? In his first study, Professor Capelli concluded that given a choice between hiring individuals in the WOTC categories, essentially individuals from families on public assistance with very limited, if any, job skills, and unemployed and disabled veterans, ex-felons, and individuals with disabilities, and job applicants without these limitations, employers will hire applicants without these limitations. WOTC eligible individuals are stigmatized. Remember, WOTC is not a credit to hire anybody. It's a credit to hire certain people who are in high unemployment categories. Those high unemployment categories remain high even when the national economy is doing well. And it's to make a choice to hire that person over somebody they're more comfortable with. That's what WOTC does. Professor Capelli also demonstrated that while moving individuals from a dependence on public assistance to gainful employment and self-sufficiently, WOTC also expands the workforce. This is because Professor Capelli concluded that about 2/3 of people in this country who are seeking new employment already have a job. So the WOTC person is the stigmatized person who, as he or she gets older, is less and less likely to be attractive to employers. So by picking a WOTC eligible person because you get this tax credit, putting that person in the workforce, you're not really disadvantaging the person who already has employment, but you are pulling someone off of welfare who might never otherwise get into the workforce. In his second study that we asked for, Professor Capelli considered the savings that result from WOTC, a very difficult task given that WOTC-eligible individuals tend to be on multiple public assistance programs. So examining just 4 of those programs, TANF, SNAP, Medicaid, and HUD housing subsidies, Professor Capelli concluded that the federal government saves close to $18,000 per year in these program costs net of the one-time WOTC credit of around $1,300. Professor Capelli also noted that there are certain savings you would get that you can't quantify easily. For example, less crime in certain neighborhoods because people are employed, more stability in families, all factors we support but that are hard to put a number on. So using Capelli's formula, working with him, but looking at only 3 programs, Medicaid, which Texas pays 42% of its Medicaid, TANF, and SNAP, we looked at what each state might save under the federal WOTC program, because you are also contributing to some of these programs. And we concluded that the aggregate that the states save under the federal WOTC program is about $2 billion a year, and the savings here in Texas are about $154 million. That's just by participating in the federal WOTC program. Now, let me also say these savings are not dynamically scored. We have a very controversial discussion in Washington about dynamic scoring. That's not what this is. This is not a behavioral guess as to what would happen if you hired these people. These are your actual savings. We know that when you move people from welfare to work, over time you are going to save money on welfare. And so these are actual savings, not dynamic scoring. In a later study, Professor Capelli looked at a new category that was enacted for WOTC just last December. That category is for hiring people who are long-term unemployed. Those are people who have been on unemployment more than 27 weeks and who at any point during that time have received federal or state unemployment benefits. And he concluded that the first-year savings of hiring those people would be about $6,000. Now, he concluded that long-term unemployment is like the WOTC categories. It is a stigmatized category because, unfortunately, employers tend to conclude that if you've been unemployed for 30 or 40 or 50 weeks, it's your fault, you weren't a very good employee, and you're a risk to hire, and will hire somebody else who hasn't been unemployed. And yet, you may be unemployed through no fault of your own, you were probably a very good employee, but getting back into the job market is hard to do, and WOTC helps the employer overcome the stigma. That category was enacted into federal law last December. So let me say, the sad reality is that within our society, there's a cohort of structurally unemployed people. These are the WOTC categories who, given a choice, are unattractive to employers absent WOTC and could end up spending their lives dependent on public assistance and at the margins of our society. And these individuals become less attractive as they age, and for that reason, 2 of the WOTC categories are in fact designed to get young people into the market before they spend their lives unable to work. I think Texas is doing the right thing by updating your state WOTC program. Although WOTC is well regarded in Congress for budgetary reasons, the amount of the credit has not been increased since it was first enacted in 1996, and the categories only relate to federal programs. I know that your bill basically is a mirror of the federal program, but over time, as you see this program work, you may have state programs that are not federal, that have no federal equivalent, but that you may want to include to your state program to help people move off of those as well. So I think by improving your local WOTC program, Texas will send a clear message to employers of its commitment to partner with them to reduce the cost of public assistance in a responsible and socially compassionate manner, while providing the best incentive in the nation to encourage employers to hire individuals who, given the opportunity, will excel at their jobs. And let me say, in response to an earlier question, Governor Pataki of the state of New York in the 90s actually did a study on retention under WOTC, and he concluded that employees who come into the workforce under WOTC stay in that job for about 2.3 years, which is higher than the normal retention period. So in answer to that earlier question, people who move off of welfare into work, they like working. They want to work. And by the way, this WOTC has a work requirement. You don't get the credit unless you hire the person. So you're putting somebody into the workforce by doing this. Let me say also about having a state-level program. Our experience has been that medium and small employers especially tend to have a greater day-to-day relationship with their state and local government than with the federal government, most likely because they're subject to economic regulation and licensing by the state. So I actually believe that Texas can do a much better job promoting WOTC and WOTC hiring at the local level than the federal government can do. The proposal to improve the state incentive program is likely to make Texas the state in which employers participate at the highest level in WOTC, and as a result, Texas will benefit from the most aggressive reduction in unemployment categories in the nation under its federal and state combined WOTC programs. And let me say also, in anticipation of or in response to an earlier question, WOTC is used much more if it is made permanent. One of the problems we've had at the federal level is that Congress allows it to expire along with other programs, and that employers have to catch up. Larger employers who have tax departments and can rely on the belief that Congress is going to do something, albeit late, will continue to participate. Medium and small employers don't. One of the reasons I think it's a good idea to have these at the state level is, to a certain extent, your state governments are much more reliable. You create things on a much more permanent basis. And so I think that's helpful to employers as well. Congress did extend WOTC for 5 years last December, and I think that's going to be a benefit, because I think, you know, the small employer down the street who has a little store has to work 18 hours a day to keep that store open, is not going to be interested in talking about having a tax credit that expired and getting it possibly if Congress actually does its job and extends it. But to the extent you make something permanent or long-term, then a lot of more employers are going to come into it. In concluding, let me say this. WOTC has bipartisan support at the federal level because it promotes principles that are universally accepted and bridge the increasingly harsh political divide. The best way out of poverty is steady and stable employment, and the best way to reduce the increasing costs of public assistance programs is to lift individuals out of poverty into the dignity of self-sufficiency. I commend you today for considering this important legislation. By improving the Texas WOTC program, this state will lead the nation in picking up a good idea at the federal level and making it better, more effective, and in so doing, improve the state's budgetary situation while also building better lives for some of the most forgotten and marginalized individuals in the state. And we have submitted some of the Capelli information and information about how we got our numbers.
Notebook you've given us today.
Yes, much of that is in there. And let me just say one thing about our numbers, just so you know. Obviously, they're estimates. I mean, your people here in Texas will have a better idea how all of this works. We took a lot of haircuts when we did our numbers. We only really take about 50% of the savings for reasons mentioned earlier. People don't move out of the programs immediately. Some people may have been hired anyway. But when we first developed these numbers, we sat down with Professor Capelli and the Congressional Joint Committee on Taxation, which runs numbers for the federal government. And I think the conclusion of that meeting is what you need to know. That is, the Joint Committee said, look, we agree with you. You obviously realize multiple savings by moving people off of welfare to work, whether it's exactly your number, whether it's a little lower, whether it's a little higher because we only take some programs into account. The truth is you do realize savings by doing this. And I think that's what this is all about.
How hard would it be to replicate the Capelli study in Texas? I mean, is that formulaic in such a way that our agencies could, you know, get our numbers and match it, or is it?
I think you could, and we'd be happy to help in doing that. I think Professor Capelli might also. But I think it can be done. We just need your database. As you said, we need to understand your silos to connect it to what we're doing. But yes, I think we could do a very thorough job and come up with a harder number that's Texas related. Our Texas number, the 154, is based on national aggregates of what you contribute to 3 programs. We could do better working with you.
And now, when you're looking at the federal one, obviously there's more than 3 programs.
Correct.
How many are there that are, how many, I've been calling them silos, how many silos are paying out on different kinds of levels of assistance,
Well-
whether it be to veterans or the poor? Or
Well, for example, we didn't look at
underemployed or whatever.
veterans' benefits, and we looked at only one set of housing benefits. We didn't look at energy assistance, which is very heavily used in the Northeast, the United States during the winter. You know, there are probably 20 programs out there that we didn't look at. It's hard to get your hands around all of these things, and so we just tried to come up with some of the bigger programs, which WOTC uses, which are obviously TANF, SNAP, Medicaid is the biggest one, and HUD. But there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them.
Chairman Simmons, please.
Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you coming down. So this came about in '96 as a result of the Clinton administration and the Congress working together on totally, in some ways, overhauling the welfare programs, right?
Well, it did, although it had a prior history.
Okay.
Because we had a prior credit. Actually, we had
Okay.
2 prior credits. We had something called the WIN credit
Uh-huh.
that was enacted in 1978,
Okay.
but it had some problems with it.
Right.
There wasn't quite the law didn't create the relationship you really need between the employer knowing that the person
I
you're
got you.
hiring is eligible.
Mhm.
So that became the targeted jobs credit, which is a lot like WOTC. And that went on until 1994. And then it expired and it was not renewed.
Okay.
And so we worked with Chairman Archer,
Uh-huh.
who became the first Republican chairman of
Right.
Ways and Means in 40 years.
Right.
And we designed a new credit called WOTC. And that's how WOTC came about.
Well, so when the question I have is, so as we implemented this program, and there were a certain percentage of employers that took advantage of it, whatever that number is,
Right.
okay? And it went on, and then our current administration, rightly or wrongly, 'cause I'm not passing judgment on that, expanded some of the assistance benefits that didn't require work-related, right? They expanded the eligibility for SNAP and some other things that didn't require, okay, I've got to go find a job and all that type of stuff. So have you seen the number of employers participating as a percentage grow along with that, or has the expansion of benefits that don't require looking for a job, has that had a negative effect on this? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. I don't have numbers on that. I would tell you this. The only thing we looked at was WOTC. And the only way
you
the
don't really
employer
know.
gets WOTC is by hiring somebody.
Right.
You can there is a work requirement. You got to hire the person. That's what you got to do.
But in theory,
So
there
that's what we
should have
looked at.
been, during the recession in '08, '09, '10, there should have been more people that were eligible to be hired just
Right.
because there were more
And
people.
it
on
has
that.
gone up, yes.
Okay.
The number of people hired under WOTC has gone up very significantly. It's now about 1.5 million a year, and it's gone up from probably 10 years ago, it was probably 500,000 or 600,000.
Okay.
One of the reasons is a massive expansion in food stamps in the United States. Almost 1/6 of the American people are on food stamps. So that category has grown a good
So that
bit.
category just itself has grown, so if anybody's hired off of that, that would work.
It would.
In these numbers.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
correct. Yes,
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Representative Villalba?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for being here. This study is very helpful, and the information here is quite thorough. Let me play devil's advocate for a moment. My friend Matt Rinaldi is not here. He would poke holes in this kind of thing, so I'm going to channel my inner Matt Rinaldi today and ask a few questions. So the first one would be, the program that you're describing has worked. Your model tells us that. The numbers tell us that. If it's working, and we are the beneficiary in the state of Texas of its benefits, and we're only paying 1/49th of it or whatever, why would we want to shoulder the expense and the cost of an entirely a new program if what the mousetrap that we have is working and we're paying less for it?
Well, that's a good question, and I appreciate it. You want to make the mousetrap bigger. The truth is, you want to move more people off of welfare, and the federal government hasn't expanded the size of WOTC, the wage base that's subject to WOTC, since 1996. So by having a state-level credit, you're going to have more employers using it. And as I said in my testimony also, employers will be more focused on what the state does than the federal government.
So you're saying that if we implemented a state program like this, that it would pick up additional individuals? I mean,
Yes.
because it's closer to the communities, and we're picking up those extra numbers. And my second question is
I think so,
related
yes.
to that. Would be structurally today, I think we're looking at probably one of the lowest unemployment rates we've seen in the last few decades. I think we're at 5.4%. There's a natural statistical unemployment rate that you're always going to have. It's right around 4.5. So we're only a point above that. So a program like this, how does it really benefit if we're already at the lowest unemployment that we've seen in the last several decades? And I know that you talked about a class of individuals that are historically unemployed, but I think even in a time like today when we have this low unemployment, that even those folks are being picked up, right? Naturally and organically, without a program like this that costs additional resources for the state and for the federal government.
I think two answers to that. One, the 5% unemployment number is probably a little low, because it's based on people who are basically seeking employment, drawing unemployment benefits. We've got a lot of people out there who've completely fallen out of the workforce. We don't even know where they are, who they are. To give you proof of that, the new WOTC category is for people who've been unemployed for more than 27 weeks. And we've been working with the IRS to implement the category. And one of the problems we have is that there is almost no way to determine who those people are or where they are or to verify who they are, because once you're over 27 weeks, according to the state and federal labor departments, you don't exist. So first I'd say 5% is a great number, but it's a low number. It's based on just one way of determining unemployment. There are a lot more people out there. The second thing I would say is that 5% or so, if you just accept it as 5%, is where the WOTC people are. It's structural unemployment. It's people who never seem to get into the workforce. And from the standpoint of your state or any other state or the federal government, those are the people who are the most expensive ones to keep on public assistance for their entire lives. So you want to reach that population. We're not talking here about people who have job skills and can move from job to job. We're talking about people who have a very hard time ever getting in the job market.
Let me seize on that point as well, because I think this is a question that a lot of folks like myself have, and that is, if given the choice between not working and remaining on public assistance and getting a living wage or whatever that might be, and being forced to work at the local Rudy's Barbecue, why would I leave the couch to go to Rudy's Barbecue and I'm probably going to make less?
You know, I got a similar question when I had a similar testimony in Colorado. And the answer that I gave is more than 1.5 million people get hired every year under WOTC, and they're in these categories. And as your workforce commissioner mentioned, more applications are made, and some people end up not getting the credit for one reason or another. But the statistics show that we have a lot of those people who do want to get off the couch, because they do go to employers and they do interview and they do take the jobs.
That's
so
why
I
the
think
allocation to me is important, because I want to know statistically what component of the WOTC categories are broken out. How many are on SNAP? How many were veterans or disabled veterans, or all the different categories? That would be helpful.
we have that, because and your workforce commissioner can provide you that, and I can also. The Department of Labor every year, actually every quarter, issues how many people get hired in each state under each category. So that data is available.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for this notebook and the summary, because it has much more than what you were able to say in your remarks. Do you have an idea, since you just indicated you've testified in Colorado and elsewhere, how many states are doing this?
At the moment, there are maybe 3 or 4. I mean, there's Texas. Of course, you wouldn't be able to enact it until next year, is my understanding. Right. Colorado, they didn't have enough time, and the session's about to end. And then Georgia's looking at it, and their session is also over, and they don't come in until January. So I know of 3. You know, in Congress they're in all the time, but you guys aren't, so it's a little
there's
different.
3 or 4 looking at it,
Yep.
but how many already have it?
I don't think there's anybody who currently has it. I think your existing deduction is the only one that's actually out there. That's what I believe is the case.
Okay. Any other questions?
Can you, Evan, if you don't mind, can you speak to employers that are taking advantage of this program? Do you see wages generally higher than minimum wage on a federal level in other states?
I don't have a database for it. Remember one thing, the minimum wage is higher in some states.
Mm-hmm.
In New York, the minimum wage is higher than it is here. California just raised the minimum wage to, I think, 13. Senator Sanders wants to raise it to $15. I mean, a lot of places are raising minimum wages, so it depends on the region and the state. Somebody working at a McDonald's in Texas may make less than somebody working at a McDonald's in New York City simply because you have different minimum wages.
Wouldn't you say then that in order for us to fully get folks off of assistance, they'd also have to make enough in order to actually not qualify for those, the federal assistance? So if you have someone that gets hired and is still making minimum wage, they may still qualify. So
I agreed. Some of that certainly is true. But remember also, some of these are people who live on a family, who are in a family that has a TANF grant. And within that family, the parents tend to encourage the kids to go out and make a living. So you may be in a household that has welfare, but somebody in that household may go out and actually try to get a job. And at the end of the day, a lot of people do get hired under this program, and to qualify for this program, they've got to be on these programs. So you have actual evidence of people getting off the couch and looking for work. My own belief, and this is just personal bias, is that people really don't want to spend their lives on welfare. They want to get out of the house and they want to work. And that's why we see them coming into stores looking for jobs.
Well,
we just have to help them get
I agree
hired.
with you, and I think that's one of the big myths, that somehow the vast majority of people want to stay on these
Yes, sir.
programs when, frankly, Texas ranks almost at the bottom in what it provides to the needy, the disabled, to our veterans and other things. We don't make it that easy for folks. And I think very, very few want to be on that less than subsistence level. So I frankly agree with you as well.
May I make a point just in response to that also?
Please.
I think that if you are in a dependence on public assistance and employers don't want to hire you, and you go in for an interview or several interviews and you don't get hired, that minimizes your enthusiasm for trying it again. What WOTC does is the employer looks at two people. You've got a guy over here who's working at the Burger King across town. He's got a job, has job skills. And then you have the guy who walks in who doesn't have much employment skills or prior experience. And the employer says, I want to hire you. You're special because I get a tax credit for hiring you. That person is going to have the enthusiasm to go work. The more times that people on welfare get turned down, the less likely they are to come back and look for another job. This elevates them a little bit. And that's why it works so well.
I agree. Well, anything that you can do and the other witnesses in helping us get a solid number on projected savings, because our legislative budget board that does our fiscal notes along with our comptroller has to have that kind of information and make a decision on how credible it is and how helpful it is, and so we could have that data would be very helpful.
We look forward to working with you on that,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you.
thank you.
Let's see. Our next question is, I'm sorry, our next witness is Dan Murray of Equifax.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Appreciate you having us here. I don't really have any other testimony. I talked to JJ earlier, and he said that you might have some questions for Charles and I from the consultant
Tell me
employer
about
standpoint.
your company and how it's involved in this.
Well, Equifax, as you probably would be more familiar with Equifax as a credit bureau and things. And a very small side of Equifax is the tax credit side, where we administer, in this case, a work opportunity tax credit for our clients. I'm the manager of government relations for the WOTC program specifically, and unlike Charles and Evan, I spend my time at the state level, for instance, working with the states, in addition to some Washington, D.C. duties. So I have a little more intimate involvement with the state workforce agencies. And just as a side note, the Texas agency is phenomenal. For the volume of work that they do, they're an amazing group of people. So we're very thankful for that. Piggybacking on what Evan said, I've seen and heard instances of the Work Opportunity Tax Credit Program affecting people's lives in a positive way. Not only the individuals themselves, but companies that I've spent time with in Washington, D.C., like Marriott, who embraces this program significantly. They will do things like buy people alarm clocks and teach them how to become successful in the workplace. So this is not just a money grab by any stretch of the imagination. So it's been an eye. This is my 9th year in the industry. It's been.
Do you know of other Texas companies that are doing this?
Oh yeah, we have a big presence in Texas. JCPenney's, Target. We have hundreds of clients, large and small.
I don't know if you have any independent information on the analysis of the cost and the benefits, but if you do, if you could take us through that, would appreciate it.
I'm sorry?
I don't know if you have any independent, other than what's already been said about the cost-benefit analysis.
I really
If you have any, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I really don't, other than Evan's exponentially smarter than I am, so his evaluation would be much more valuable to you than me.
Okay, so you mentioned Marriott does this, and then you mentioned who else?
Well, Target, JCPenney's, they're limited brands. It's for the larger companies. It's in Walmart. It's pretty endless in the larger companies. The mid-level companies, as you said, the ones that don't have a large tax program, that's a little bit more spotty, but it's available to anyone.
Okay. In regards to, is it your belief that if we added an additional tax credit in Texas, that we would see a significant increase in those
Oh, I would be
taking
assured of that,
advantage
yes.
of this?
Absolutely.
And how many Texas companies are your clients?
Probably 120, 140, something in that neighborhood.
Any questions, members?
What's the average number of employees that the companies that Equifax serves and that take advantage of that? And I guess what I want to understand is you said large and small. It seems to me that it would be more likely that some of the larger companies like the JCPenney's and the Marriotts that are hiring, maybe 100 people at a time, may tell you, hey, and let's try to take advantage of this program as often as possible because we want that credit. That may not be the case for the smaller business. So tell me the difference between how a large employer would take advantage of this versus a small employer, and whether or not you have a focus on that.
Well, first of all, let me address your first question. Equifax's overall handles clients from 20 people to 20,000, 30,000 employees. The industry group that we're all a part of, the National Employment Opportunities Network, has 14 consultants within that group that are from the size of ADP, which are huge, down to someone that might handle a small McDonald's shop, or somebody with 10 employees that just doesn't want to, deal with the paperwork and the, evaluating credit and so on. So it's a pretty broad range from a consultant side. From strictly a small employer side, anyone can do this tax credit, and it's not a difficult credit to start. You just, they fill out one form, you evaluate that and send it to the state. So this is for everybody. This is for all size employers. I think some of the smaller ones may not have the opportunity to find out about it as easily as a large company, for the reason that he mentioned, that they have a large tax group that maybe came from someone else that was using it. So it's same for everyone.
So would, since you are counseling employers on this, I would assume that sometimes you try to take advantage of the refund that we currently have. But if we matched it to WOTC or something similar to the feds, would you believe that there would be significantly more people accessing it than there are today?
Well, I would think so, because I think that just by default, you would have more employers knowing about it. And with you'd mentioned some marketing things earlier about newsletters and things like that. I think that's all very important. Having worked directly with every state office, there's 52 or 53 of them, counting Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. One of the downsides, I would say, to their offices being small and not very well known is that they aren't able to get the word out. The consultants, as a general rule, are the ones that are kind of the marketing arm for the WOTC program. So I think with some state involvement in that and a focus from the state side, I think it would have there would be nothing else for it to do but grow.
All right. Thank you. Any questions, members? Thank you. Appreciate you coming down, Dan. And by the way, I meant to ask you and Evan, if you have ideas for improving the House bill, please know that, again, we hastily put it together and there may be some things that we missed. We tried to match it with the federal program, but if there's stuff that you see that, again, would be Texas friendly to employers and be cost effective with meaningful savings, please make it better. I mean, we would love to have a critique of it. That was we filed the original bill hurriedly, and then we had a substitute hurriedly, so it's very possible we have some glaring omissions, or we have tracked something that maybe is not going to work. So please don't hesitate to critique it, and if you can get that information to my staff, we'll circulate it and see where we can improve on it. And also, if there's been some problems in the federal area that we can avoid, since they're not doing much in Washington nowadays, and it hasn't probably been looked at for a while, if there's objective criticisms of the federal one that we can avoid or cure, then please share that with us also. Okay, I call Charles Asensio of ADP.
Good morning. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Charles Asensio. I'm Vice President of Government Relations with ADP. I have been working on federal and state hiring incentives for over 30 years, and before ADP, I spent 4 years with the U.S. Department of Labor, Region 3, which was Philadelphia, and Region 4 out of Atlanta. ADP has a tax credit service bureau, and we're the largest in the nation in terms of processing requests. We represent thousands of employers. One of the questions that came out was small employers. ADP has looked at why small employers do not participate in the program, and we have developed applications that facilitate their participation in the program, literally something on a mobile device. We're expanding that product line to enable small employers to more readily or easily participate in the program. You also mentioned about employers in this state. I won't go through a laundry list of folks that we represent, but we do have a list available through NEON, the National Employment Opportunities Network, that I'm willing to say there's hundreds and hundreds of employers listed on the application, on the list of participant. Perhaps the Commissioner of Workforce, State Workforce, Texas Workforce, can also provide you with a list of the requests. But there are literally hundreds and hundreds. One of the biggest causes for the small employer not to participate in the program was because of hiatuses, when the program would come in and out. Small employer are not set up, do not have the time nor the sophistication of staff to engage in an activity, complete the 8850. It's not only an 8850 form, there's a 9061 form that also has to be completed, and send that information into the state within 28 days from the first day of work. They're just not set up that way. They're focused more on developing their business and concentrating on doing the day-to-day activities.
Yeah, most of us don't even start thinking about this until April 15th.
That's exactly correct. That's exactly correct. With that, I would love to throw it out to questions.
Do you, your company essentially is like a payroll administrator?
We're a significant player in the payroll space, and we certainly integrate with our payroll division with the tax credit division.
How hard has it been to shift, or is it hard to shift employers' mindset from, I'm just not going to hire somebody that's been on food stamps, or I'm not going to hire somebody that's, even a disabled vet. I mean, we do so much for our veterans, and it's still not enough. So I think they have, though, their own following, if you will, to where everybody wants to help a vet, particularly a disabled vet. But
Right.
Moving people off of public assistance, the welfare to work programs of the early 1900s, 1990s, is there still that resistance out there?
Fortunately, we've been able to break through that barrier. We've been able to sit down, especially in the financial community.
Bless you.
God bless you. Financial institution, banks, investment bankers, etc., as well as other in the technology areas, to say, look, these folks are worth training. And there's an incentive to hire them to offset those costs associated with training. And I'm pleased to note that there are literally hundreds of institutions like that that are employing those folks and giving them the opportunity to move up.
Now, I'm sure some employers have the programs, and I'm going to go anecdotal here and actually tell you all a true story. When Governor Bush was our governor, he had an aggressive welfare to work concept, and I was chairman of the Economic Development Committee, and there were several bills in my committee then. And I went to see him, and he was excited about doing something in this area. He was, just profoundly excited. And, when we had our first meeting and we got to become, first name basis, and I think he would still remember a lot of the things we did well together. He called me in and he said, look, I've talked to American Airlines, Southwest Airlines, some of the major hotel chains, and they're ready to put people on welfare to work. And, then I suggested to him some of the problems, because some of these folks, as we know, come in, there's no, they don't know how to dress for an interview, no transportation. They, have been rejected so much that they expect to be rejected every time. And he worked with me and others and insisted on, that we do some of the workforce training programs that we're now all very accustomed to having, because he saw that was part of the part of the equation to make it successful. And it sounds like we got some Texas employees and certainly national employers that are doing this with people. The alarm clock anecdote was interesting, but they really take time to get these people permanently out of the system, which brings me to my last question to you. Do we have any data on the success rate of non-WOTC, non-WOTC employees staying on the job versus people that are WOTC employees? I mean, I think somebody mentioned earlier over 2 years, but what data do we have on that?
What we've learned is that the state of New York did a study, Governor Pataki, and he took a look specifically at welfare recipients, TANF, and he noticed that the retention rates were considerably higher of those individuals in the state of New York who are on TANF once they were hired. And the average was 2.3 years that they stayed on the job. You know, the concept of the work opportunity tax credit fundamentally is to take an individual that for the most part is in poverty and give them an initial step of getting into a job. There isn't an employer within the boundaries of the United States that would simply hire them for the tax credit. They're hiring them because they want a good worker. And a trained good worker, the fact that they were on TANF, food stamps, or some form of disability is so irrelevant. They have a good employee. And once they have that trained employee, they're going to keep them, and they're going to pay them accordingly.
But you do agree with Mr. Sorry, was it
McDale?
I'll call you McHale, but that's not it. McDale, you do agree that with some employers there's still a stigma. In other words, not every employer is going to be as benevolent as that, and some people just, for whatever their philosophy, their politics, are suspect of someone who has
Sure.
been on benefits, and they think, oh God, well, like the stereotype, these are lazy people that don't want to work. And so the only way these people may get to work is going to be an incentive like this combined with one at the state level as well.
I know of employers, both in the state of Texas as well as national, without mentioning names, that have adopted an internal incentive program for their work sites to hire, to recruit, to go out to food banks, to go out to welfare offices, to go out to not the homeless, but mothers, single mothers, et cetera, to employ those individuals. And then the manager is incentivized by his P&L adjustments for working that person and keeping that person. I think it works. I think another question that came up earlier was, would your program incentivize or encourage more participation? There is no doubt, in my mind, poverty is at a local level. They're citizens of the state of Texas. And if you get a federal tax credit, that's one thing. But when you start offering an incentive to hire someone where you're giving a state franchise tax credit, I think I commend you. I think it's excellent. I think the awareness at the local level. Last night we were talking about chambers of commerce. Chambers of commerce are local. How many of them at the local level in Brownsville are advocating, hey, hire a work opportunity, and eligible for the work opportunity tax credit? But if you give them a state franchise tax credit, it gives an incentive for that local chamber to market, to let employers know about the incentive, and it'll grow, and you'll see the results immediately.
Any questions, members? Well, I want to thank you all very much for your testimony, and we'll probably be calling on you all again as when you get into the session. Please, again, thank you so much. Some of you have come a very long way, but let me ask you again, if you have information, this committee is a very intelligent committee. It's got diversity in many ways, and we all want the data to make sure this is good for Texas. I'm convinced, but I want everybody to to do that. So thank you very much. Members, we had, our last witness was going to be Bill Hammond, and he couldn't make it. So we don't have any further testimony, unless there is anybody I've missed. Okay, I don't think I have. Let me talk to you again, remind you all about scheduling. We're going to go over for lunch now. It's almost 12. And then after that, we will go back to the hotel, and then we will go to the Port of Brownsville, and then we'll be back and give you all a little rest time, and then we'll have that brief reception. I want to thank Mayor Patel. He's given us a little gift bag, and perhaps there's a South Padre Island T-shirt y'all can wear back on the plane and look like spring breakers. Although we're a little gray in that area, we can pretend. I want to thank JJ, Tony, and Angie for doing this. We're also helping on Chia's committee, so they've been doing double and triple duty. And I want to thank. You might be able to draft them. You might be able to draft them. I don't think they have a hard time staying out on South Padre Island, you know, and so for the benefit of the state of Texas, of course. All right, well, with that, members, I want to talk to you all about one thing, and you don't have to answer it right now. Congratulations to Chairman Simmons. He is chairing a special committee, and your meeting, Mr. Chairman, is when?
June the 9th.
Okay. Right now, we have some a meeting scheduled in May, but if we can tie it into his meeting, we probably need about a day and a half.
I'm probably looking at half a day, so I have to do it in the afternoon.
Okay, so maybe
Maybe the 8th,
when are y'all?
May the 15th.
In May, the 12th, 13th, 14th.
Well, if you
The reception on May 15th, is that right?
Yeah. 14th, yeah.
Is that the Bob's thing?
I just said
The 13th.
well, with Chairman Simmons having his meeting, if he did his in the afternoon,
yeah,
and we started,
the afternoon before, or the day.
yeah, or the day before, yeah,
8th, 9th.
you're right, in Austin. If that works for everybody,
May 8th, 9th?
June 8th. In other words, we can cancel the May meetings and move them all in so that, to help him and myself. Okay.
June 8th, 9th. That'd be good.
Ramon, do you know your schedule yet for that time? Okay. Well, let's shoot for that, and we'll check with the members that aren't present. But that may be our target, and to cancel May's meetings. Okay.
Chairman.
Committee
Chairman.
stands adjourned.
Chairman.
Thank you, members.
Chairman.
I'm sorry.
I just want to say in closing how much I appreciate this particular charge, given that we have approximately 50 million people in this country that are officially poor, and so many that are getting closer to poverty. There's always been a time to address those persons. I can tell you that my district, in particular, District 90, is one of the poorest districts and one of the fastest growing cities in the state. And it's quite sad that our poverty rate is hovering at around $13,000 per family. A third of my district lives in poverty. So when we look at this issue, this is a tremendous issue that should be taken seriously, which we are. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. And while we didn't have a tremendous amount of the quantity, the quality was here in the speakers. And I want to thank you all, Evan and all of you guys for coming so far, and Larry for the words. I think that it's really important for this state that we really look into how employers are hiring, and whether or not they are hiring at a greater rate of pay, because we all know that $7 an hour won't cut it. And if we've got employers that are smart enough and wise enough to take advantage of this, and organizations and companies like Equifax and ADP doing what they do to help educate their clients, then we're going on the right track. And this is something that I just want to thank the speakers personally, Chairman, and thank you as well for bringing us down to your hometown.
Thank you, members. And again, I think we still need to flesh this out and do the analysis that Chairman Simmons made, but it seems like if, even with their formula at 154 million in savings, it's a bang for the buck, and I think we'll see probably bigger numbers when we look at more categories.
We need to send their analysis to LBB.
Yes. JJ will make sure that's done and see if we can further clean this up. And again, please don't hesitate to critique the federal model and my bill, because I want to hopefully make it our bill. But if it ties into improvements, since the feds haven't looked at it for so long, we want to do that. I mean, I think this is the moral thing to do. It's good government, and it's just good policy. I know that there are some good corporate citizens that are doing this, but I think there'd be a whole heck of a lot more if we did this right, and really could help some small business out. Maybe even look to them for some leadership in doing this. Okay, members, we stand adjourned. I guess we'll have a quorum at lunch, so where's the palm? At the palm, yes. Where is that, sir? It is